Jeremy Corbyn and the appeal of the gentle in an age of performative cruelty. It occurs to me that one of the most appealing things about Jeremy Corbyn is that literally everybody in the world thinks they are definitely more gangster than Jeremy Corbyn. And I think this is, frankly, a good thing, and one of his biggest advantages. It's why the media's continuing attempts to turn him into a terrorist high-fiving, communist spying, monarch-deriding threat to our national security always falls so flat. He just seems so nice. I mean, of course he'd be polite to Palestinian guerrillas. He's nice to everyone. Just look at him. It's like finding a picture of your school music teacher at a party with the Cray twins, and coming to the conclusion that because he's just talking to them, instead of whipping out a Sten gun and shooting them down, he's as complicit in East End mob violence as Tony Lambrianou or Jack the Hat McVitie. The best the Tories have ever been able to throw at Corbyn in this regard is the fact that he talked to some people, some of whom were Palestinians, some of whom were in the IRA, and one of whom was a dodgy Czech bloke playing at being George Smiley. But I said hello to Ant McPartlin once, crossing a footbridge in Newcastle which no longer exists, and that doesn't make me responsible for I'm a celebrity. This is also why the Tories' even more boneheaded tactic, which is to have a go at Corbyn for once having been in a relationship with Diane Abbott, also doesn't really work. Sure, it elicits snide laughter from the kind of people who despise Abbott herself for being A, black, B, large, and C, a woman, but that's as far as it gets you. Most normal people react to being informed of Corbyn's romantic past in the same way you might if you heard your nerdiest mate had somehow wound up having a threesome with the Bella twins. You sly dog, Jeremy. You old rascal. The thing is, there's just something incredibly comforting about Jeremy Corbyn in a time when every other politician seems to be squaring up to the lot of us like Conor McGregor to a bus and telling us that if we mess with them, they'll wreck us like, swear down. Look at Trump and his frankly shabby attempts to pass himself off as some kind of mafioso figure. Look at Bolsonaro in Brazil and his ludicrous posturing. Look at Viktor Orban in Hungary, outlawing gender studies classes because he's too frightened to think about how it might feel to be a girl, or why fascist regimes always seem to have a hard-on for statues of muscular men with their asses on show. All trying to convince us of something, these lads, but frankly, I find it about as convincing as Sean Hannity's cringeworthy MMA training clips. On which note, I never thought I'd see anything more embarrassing than John DuPont's attempts at wrestling in Team Foxcatcher, but at least he wasn't so scared of making body-to-body contact with another man that he went to MMA classes and only ever did stand-up. Can you imagine Jeremy Corbyn ever being this desperate to show us he's well hard? Of course you can't. It's not that I don't get the appeal of these big bully types. It's a scary world, a non-consensual world. Most of us find ourselves caught up in the midst of systematic, structural violence every day. All of us are subject to some degree of trauma, some degree of violence, purely because we're forced to exist in a system which treats us like things. For those of us who have more specific traumas in our past, it's even worse, but everyone these days has to deal with being brutalized, with being treated like a piece of moving meat, cursed to think and love and question every day. When you are brutalized like that, you have to put on some kind of psychic armor. You have to project a front of toughness to intimidate people into not fucking with you. You have to fake a jaded posture, like you've seen it all before. It's the way the world is. No one gets to be good. Suck it up and stop crying. What are you? Some kind of snowflake? That's why, when we encounter someone who doesn't trigger those responses in us, we warm to them. What a lot of us respond to in Corbyn is that sense of gentleness, the sense that he isn't out to intimidate us, so we can drop the shields with him around. And it feels good to drop those shields. Our armour is heavy. Honestly, I swear, I just have to look at a picture of Jeremy Corbyn, and I feel so reassured my blood pressure goes down. One can get attached to that feeling. One thing which is particularly telling, of course, is the thing which most of those who really seem to find themselves irrationally angered by Jeremy Corbyn hate most of all. The incident which led to the epochal question time Wall of Gammon picture. The fact that he has expressed a reluctance to use Britain's nuclear arsenal and be complicit in the end of all human life as we know it. Imagine being so obsessed with projecting strength, so wedded to a dismal sense of grievance with the world, that you angrily demand that your political leader commit themselves with the bloodthirst of a Viking berserker to a course of action which will literally wipe you out of existence. Nuke me, Daddy! Nuke me! Incidentally, when I say we all get brutalized by structural systemic faults in our society, that's a big one. We all have to live with the fact that at any moment we could all be obliterated forever at the whim of a man with the emotional maturity of the kind of kid who winds up being ironically murdered in a Roald Dahl story. Elaine Scarry calls it thermonuclear monarchy. Sun Ra put it more poetically when he pointed out that nuclear war is a motherfucker. Whatever. You can do as much MMA as you want, but you can't DOS choke a bomb. Since last year, I've been working on a show called Struggle Play. My work in progress towards creating the first draft of the show is available on this channel. The current draft has changed a lot since then, but it remains a show about the joy of fighting, of being physically pushed to one's limits by another human being, and losing. Some of the happiest moments of my life have involved being asphyxiated. It's a high that lasts. It lasts because it frees you from the constant burden of having to be strong, to always win, to not back down. Being forced to submit to someone else is an example of what Georges Bataille called a limit experience, a chance to feel more fully human, freed from the weight of our armour. I'm not saying Jeremy Corbyn is the political equivalent of being choked out by your partner consensually. In fact, he'd probably be shocked if you suggested the idea. But in a sea of politicians pouncing around like alpha tops and fooling no one, he gives us the same sense of sweet, all-enveloping relief from the burden of being the brutalized and brutalizing inmates of the prison of the now. And that's why we love him. And if anybody out there tries to mess with him, well, he's too sweet to get nasty. Us, though? Well...